Good morning. Welcome to Ask Being TV. Episode, what are we on, 3, 4 now?
Four.
Episode 4, okay.
I count higher than 2.
Last week we talked about, if you're a company, how do you attract top talent to your organization, talked about all the different avenues companies should be taking to get great people attracted to them and then ultimately hired over. This week I thought we'd flip the script and talk about how a candidate can use all the different avenues available to them to conduct the most thorough job search. Of course, it'll probably change depending on the level of a candidate, but let's just kind of quickly throw out all the different avenues available to a candidate when conducting a job search and talk about which ones are most effective, what works, what doesn't work, give some people out there some peace of mind as to how the outside world perceives them when they're seen on X avenue, for example, right? What's like the first thing you think of if you're a candidate looking for work?
Really quick, right? Is it a specific kind of candidate? Are we talking about engineers or managers or kind of candidates? Because I think that might actually vary.
Let's kind of let the discussion break down, how a different type of candidate should approach their jobs. Because of course, an executive is going to conduct it differently than a fresh college grad.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Let's throw out all the different avenues out there that someone could use to conduct a job search, and maybe we'll talk about for who it's appropriate to use that tool.
I think, in my opinion, I think the first step to any job search is figuring out what you completely want for your next step in your career. So analyzing where your career has been, analyzing what's the best step for you in the next job and what's the best step for you 5 years down the road. And then conducting your job search depending on what that ideal next step looks like for you. Because if you're looking for a very specific job description, then posting your job on a job board is pretty much just it's not going to work. But if you pretty much just need anything, any sort of job, something to pay the bills, then maybe something like that could be the right way to conduct it.
So you're saying you have to know what you want in order to conduct a job search?
Right.
Okay, so fine. So let's break down candidates by active candidates that know what they want, or at least know they want to leave, and then passive candidates who would make a move but aren't actively looking, right? Passive candidates conduct job searches too. They're just not, jobs are finding them. They're not finding candidates, right? But they're still putting themselves out there.
There's a big X factor here that we're not talking about. Is that we tell all candidates they shouldn't get to the point where they have to have an active job search because they should have been talking to somebody like us.
Or just perpetually looking for that new opportunity. I mean, I think at least for the active guys, the first thing that you should probably do is just reach out to past managers. I mean, most of the time even the managers aren't staying at companies longer than about 3 years, so there's a good chance that the people that you've worked with in the past obviously probably felt you did a good job for them. They're probably in new places doing new things, and a lot of times these guys, when they find new jobs, are very open to bringing old teams with them. So probably the first step would be contacting old managers they've worked with in the past. I think every time they should get a call on the passive side from a recruiter, even if it's not the right time, take down the guy's information. Put it somewhere. When it's time and when your search becomes a lot more active, remember all the people who contacted you over the past 6 months or a year and reach back out to them. Probably working on fairly similar jobs, so there's a good chance that they may have something at that point that would be relevant for them.
Yeah. So what are all the different avenues that someone could expose themselves to in order to, one, actively find a job, or two, passively be found, right?
Touch your network.
Touch your network.
Reach out to your friends, past colleagues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Reach out to a good recruiter. Ask those friends who they've worked with in the past. I think that we're a great resource, and I think that whether you're actively or passively looking, I will shamelessly say that a good recruiter is the best resource you can possibly have in your job search. That's what we do for a living. To do that, you should be updating all of your professional networking profiles and such. You should update your LinkedIn profile. This sounds funny, but update your Facebook, update your MySpace, and that stuff that we're using today to help. There's stuff that managers are using today. You can certainly cruise places like InPost, cruise places to a lesser extent Dice, Monster, some of those things. I think there are a lot of sites. InPost is a great one where a lot of the startup community is posting today, but it's just technology jobs, and I'm sure there are a lot of other sites out there like it.
Okay.
I think that's a great place just to kind of 3 main avenues of okay, I'm going to look for a job that you should set down and just make your first week.
But I think it's also important to figure out let's say you specifically want to work in the advertising, engineering space, whatever, you want to work within advertising. So you do your research, you find out what companies are working within that space, and that way you can target those companies. I mean, it's probably not the most efficient way to submit your resume to the HR hole or whatever, but I mean, Pull.
Pull.
Wow. Holy crap! I was like, do we go there?
I heard what you said, but I've also heard what I
Are
wanted
we
to
going
hear.
for ratings, or what are we doing? Yeah, and I agree with Pete. I think you know, when these guys go on and just start submitting their resumes online to all these companies, I think they are just sending their resume into a black hole. I definitely think it's good to you know, put your resume on Monster, but do it confidentially. You know?
Yeah.
Don't put yourself out there like that. I mean, it just cheapens you. You know, no matter how good you are, they'll always put you on that lower peg if you're blasted all over Monster. If you put it up confidentially, though, at least you can be a little bit choosier with who you speak with. You're not going to get calls from people all over the place. You know, these like just straight IT recruiters who recruit across the gamut, who are calling up Oracle DBAs and, you know, pitching them on Java architect positions. You know, you can respond back to the emails that are relevant and kind of push aside the ones that aren't.
Yeah, but the problem with that is, I was just going to throw out there that I think like good recruiting firms don't even use Monster.
Yeah.
So your chances of getting a good recruiter to call you.
I think they do. I mean, I think if you ask, you know, most recruiting firms, I think they use it less and less. But to say that you never use Monster, I mean, if we use Monster, it would be something where everything else is exhausted. I mean, you don't want to let great candidates get by you. Granted, most of the great candidates aren't on Monster, but if you're, you know, there are those gems in between.
Yeah.
And if you don't use it at all, you're just missing those guys.
Why is, for a candidate, why is posting your resume on Monster considered so taboo right now? You know, why are we almost like looking down upon even a phenomenal candidate that's posted on Monster? Like, what's wrong with you? Why is that?
Well,
when did that happen?
I mean, it's like it's almost, to me, it's almost the same thing as if you go on Facebook and they're like, okay, what are you doing right now? And it's like, oh, I'm looking for a date. You know what I mean? it reeks of desperation.
Yeah.
I think that part of what it comes down to, we were talking about this earlier, that I'm serious whenever I say that most, like the top 10% of talent never actively looks for a job. The right job finds them first, and I think, especially in our minds, and I think in a lot of the rest of the hiring community's minds, you're looking at it as, if this guy is as good as he claims he is, why didn't somebody find him and pick him off, or, you know, and find him and actively recruit him away from the company first? Is he just the kind of, you know, I think that most people just dismiss the option that he doesn't consider roles until he's just convinced it's time for him to leave. Most of the intelligent community doesn't do that.
Right.
So I think that's part of it, is that we look at him as, you know, maybe he just didn't have the muster to make it whenever he got headhunted out. So, or, you know, went out and even they didn't look at it from a headhunter perspective. One of his friends calls him and says, hey, come interview it. You know, come talk to me about my new company that I just started at. There are tons of passive means for candidates to leave their roles. Why did things have to get so bad at his current role that he had to actively leave? Why wasn't, like, what happened in there that kept him from leaving before things got to that point?
Yeah, like, why couldn't he touch his network? Why couldn't he just
Why-
apply to like a couple jobs that he knows? And
Yeah,
you know, get some
why
interviews?
didn't he get to those? Why didn't it work for him in those first three steps I talked about? Networking, find a good recruiter, and then update your stuff out there so people can find you. Like, why didn't those three means work for you? There definitely is the chance. I think that's why from time to time you find good candidates on Monster, just that nobody touched them.
Right.
Just nobody found them. Or they wouldn't listen whenever that person did find them. But I think by and large, we realize the reality of it is that somebody probably did, and they didn't make the grade.
Right.
Well, I think different personality types are going to start their job search in different places. You know, you're going to have the guys who anything happens with the company, any kind of instability whatsoever, and they're going to be looking to jump ship. And then you probably have the guys that come from a little bit more of an old school mentality who are going to, you know, stay on to the bitter end. They feel that sense of loyalty to their employer. You know, rightly or wrongly, they're going to stay there until it's a sinking ship, and then they may not start their job search until, you know, the writing is absolutely on the wall, it's time to get out now, and then you go from not looking at all to an
100%.
extremely aggressive job search where you're
Right.
exhausting like every avenue, Monster, headhunters, everything, and then
Because is the means really that important? It's really the
Yeah.
end, right? It's the job that you're after. So all different avenues that you could
I think-
put yourself out to. Why not?
I think the problem is, though, a lot of times when you talk to the candidates that are at that stage and they're interviewing with everybody and considering any opportunity, they usually take a job they don't really want. They kind of settle a little bit.
I think that kind of like,
No, good.
Time's up for what?
I think that's another like
Just keep
assumption.
going, just keep going.
I think that's another like assumption that we make with Monster candidates too, and it is kind of like a downfall on them, is that we're assuming that they're interviewing with a lot of different companies. So we're assuming that if we introduce them to one, then it's 1 out of 10 instead of it being 1 out of 1. So it kind of minimizes our chances of, in all honesty, making us money. So therefore, it's like, is it worth our time to sit there and try to find this guy a candidate or a job when he already is interviewing with 10 other companies?
On the flip side, though, guys who are on Monster are not window shopping. Like, they want a job.
Yeah,
Unless they're passive candidates.
Yeah, unless they're passive candidates. But it's kind of a double-edged sword. When you go after the super passive guys, there's a very good chance that they could stay where they are.
Yeah.
With Monster guys, they want to leave. So yeah, they're for sure going to take a job. They might be looking at 5 other things, but they're going to take one of them.
Yeah.
They're not going to get to the end game and be like, I'm going to stay where I am for now.
Yeah.
Let's talk about LinkedIn, right? So LinkedIn is a networking site, right? You're there to network, but come on, what are you really there for?
Hey, over here!
Okay, talking about LinkedIn.